Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take those complex reports, all that dense source material, and really boil it down for you. And today, we're looking at Sweden, specifically its cybersecurity posture now that it's joined NATO.
Yeah.
The whole threat landscape has shifted. So we've got intelligence briefs, energy sector analyses, financial reports. We're going to map out the vulnerabilities and what Sweden's doing about it.
It's a fascinating intersection, isn't it? Geopolitics hitting the digital world head on. I mean, our sources are pretty clear. Sweden's move away from neutrality wasn't sudden. It was accelerated by seeing these hybrid warfare tactics, especially after Crimea in 2014.
Right.
And then the full-scale invasion of Ukraine just underlined it all. Cyber defense isn't just for the military anymore. It's fundamental national stability. Sweden saw what happened, what its neighbors like Finland experienced, and knew things had to change. Joining the alliance really kicked that threat level up a notch.
That really sets the scene. And navigating these kinds of critical security issues, well, it takes resources. That's why we want to thank our sponsor for supporting this deep dive, www.cisomarketplace.com. Okay, so let's unpack this. Sweden's in NATO. Strategically, that puts a target on its back, digitally speaking. Who exactly are the main players that Swedish intelligence like us are worried about? What are their goals here?
Well, MSD, that's the Swedish Military Intelligence and Security Service, and other researchers basically point to two main categories. Though, and this is important, the lines are getting really blurry between them.
Sure.
First, you've got your state-sponsored actors. These are the big ones, often called APTs. Advanced persistent threats, think major powers with, significant resources.
Like Russia and China. The sources mention them specifically.
Exactly. Russia and China are prominent. Their goals, according to us, are pretty straightforward but serious.
Yeah.
Espionage, stealing sensitive government or corporate data, and maybe even setting things up for future sabotage. Long game stuff.
Okay, state actors, that makes sense. What's the second category? You mentioned blurry lines.
Right. The second group is cyber criminal networks. Now, their main driver, usually money, ransomware, extortion, that's their bread and butter.
So financial crime, basically.
Primarily, yes. But here's the thing. They've become incredibly sophisticated. So sophisticated, in fact, that their attacks, even if just for money, can cause massive disruption, serious enough to become a national security concern, not just a policing issue. Musk notes their success rate and complexity are definitely increasing.
But I thought state actors focused on military secrets, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Why would they mix with, well, criminals?
That's the core of this hybrid threat idea. The real danger, increasingly, is the connection between the state actors and these criminal groups.
How so?
Well, maybe a state wants to cause disruption but needs deniability. They might hire or enable a criminal group to launch an attack. Or conversely, a criminal group might hack into a system for ransomware but unwittingly create an opening, an access point, that a state actor then uses for spying.
I see. So the criminals do the noisy work, maybe, and the state actors slip in behind them.
Sometimes, yeah. Or the skills and tools just bleed over. It basically lowers the barrier for anyone, state or criminal, to conduct really high-impact attacks. It makes the whole threat landscape much more dangerous and unpredictable.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, speaking of capabilities, we know the Swedish military cyber units are working hard to align with NATO standards. That's good. But the sources we looked at point to a pretty big gap, a weak link domestically. What are the numbers saying about the civilian side? Public sector readiness.
Yeah, this is where it gets, frankly, worrying. The Swedish Civil Contingencies Agency, MSB, they did a survey in 2023. And the headline figure: only 31% of public organizations actually met the basic cybersecurity requirements.
31%?
Yeah, exactly. 31%. Think about that. Schools, local councils, healthcare providers, the vast majority are falling short on the basic.
That sounds bad. I mean, if the military is hardening its defenses, but 69% of the public sector isn't meeting basic standards.
It's a huge strategic vulnerability. You know the saying about a chain being only as strong as its weakest link. Right now, the civilian sector looks like Sweden's weakest link. To properly integrate with NATO, where collective defense relies on everyone being reasonably secure, that gap is a massive problem. It makes the whole country a softer target.
Just 31%. Is that because the standards are too complex? Or is it funding or awareness? Or maybe all of the above?
Likely a mix of all those things, but whatever the cause, the potential consequences are enormous, especially when you think about the kind of data these organizations hold.
Right, and the reports flag something really specific and quite chilling. The risk to Swedish citizens' personal medical data. Prescriptions, health conditions, even mental health information.
Yeah.
Why is that specific data such a gold mine for attackers, especially state actors?
Because it moves beyond just financial value or operational disruption. This kind of deeply personal data, as the sources put it, is a substantial tool for extortion.
Extortion. How?
Imagine a foreign intelligence service gets hold of sensitive health records. They can then target specific individuals, maybe a politician, a senior military officer, a CEO, someone influential. They can use that private information, maybe about a hidden condition or treatment, to pressure them, to manipulate them, to coerce them into acting against their country's interests.
So it's weaponizing personal health information for strategic gain.
Precisely. It's moving the battleground into people's private lives. It's psychological warfare, really, enabled by cyber means.
That is genuinely disturbing, and it puts incredible pressure on the security professionals working in those public bodies, doesn't it? Seeing that low 31% adoption rate next to the potential for weaponized medical data, it just screams urgency. They need the right tools, the right support, the right partners to close that massive gap.
Absolutely. The challenge is immense.
Which is exactly why resources that connect professionals with solutions are so vital. We're grateful for the support of our sponsor, www.cisomarketplace.com, who help make those connections happen. Okay, let's pivot slightly. Where do these threats hit the economy hardest? The sources single out the financial sector. The risk assessment there is rated as high. What are Swedish banks actually seeing on the ground? Are attacks getting worse?
Oh, definitely. The intensity is way up. Take DDoS attacks, distributed denial of service. The goal there is usually to overwhelm systems, knock services offline, shake public confidence.
Right, flood the servers.
Exactly. Well, the sources say the duration of these DDoS attacks against Swedish financial institutions has increased tenfold.
10 times longer.
10 times longer. And the sheer power, the strength of the attacks, that's up roughly 15 times compared to earlier periods. That's not just a brief outage. That's a sustained assault designed to cause real instability and fear.
15 times stronger. That's a massive increase in capability.
Yeah.
What about other types of attacks? Ransomware, data theft.
Yep, those two. Ransomware is a constant threat. We see global examples impacting finance, like Loan Depot or Evolve Bank and Trust. And then there are info stealers, specifically designed to grab login credentials, financial details, personal data. Think about the Santander attack in 2024. That's the kind of thing they're worried about. All that stolen data can then be sold, used for fraud, or even feed back into those state-sponsored operations we talked about.
So it's a barrage from the outside.
Yeah.
But is that the whole picture? What about threats from inside the banks?
That's a really critical point the sources raise. The insider threat, or sometimes they call it the enabler. This could be someone actively working for a foreign state or a criminal gang, maybe feeding them information or manipulating transactions.
A mole, basically.
Could be. Or, and this might be even more common, it could be an unaware employee, someone who gets tricked, maybe through phishing or socially engineered into giving up access or credentials. In complex financial systems, one compromised insider, even an unwitting one, can be the key that unlocks the door for a major attack aimed at destabilizing things.
Okay, finance is under serious pressure. Let's switch to the other critical sector mentioned, energy. With the war in Ukraine and the whole security situation, obviously the power grid is a major concern. Where are the biggest weak spots in Sweden's energy infrastructure?
The reports highlight three main areas. First, the digital control systems. These are the brains of the operation, managing the flow of power. They're centralized, they're digital, and if you hit them successfully, you can cause widespread blackouts. Highly vulnerable.
Makes sense. The digital nerve center.
Second, you have the big centralized power generation points. Think nuclear reactors. They're obvious high-impact targets, both physically and digitally.
Right. And the third?
The physical infrastructure for transmitting the power. Substations are key nodes, but also the big underwater high voltage, direct current cables, the HVDC cables. These carry enormous amounts of electricity, often between countries. They're vital, but also physically exposed.
Okay, exposed cables, vulnerable control systems. Can you give us a sense of the potential impact? What happens if, say, those HVDC cables are targeted?
The analyses run scenarios on this. They look at something called an N2 event, basically. What happens if two critical components fail at the same time?
Like two cables being cut.
Exactly. A coordinated attack taking out two major offshore HVDC cables, or maybe simultaneous problems at nuclear plants. The result could be significant energy not supplied, or ENS blackouts, basically.
And the cost?
The estimated total interruption costs, or DIRAC, are staggering. We're talking in the tens of millions of Swedish kroners per hour that the power is
It's
out.
okay, hour.
Per hour. And this isn't just theoretical whiteboard stuff. Sources point to real incidents, suspected sabotage attempts on electricity and communication cables already happening in the Baltic Sea. So the threat of physical attacks complementing cyber attacks is very real.
Wow. Okay, so let's pull this together. We have a civilian sector that's lagging way behind on basic cyber hygiene, intensified attacks pounding the financial sector, and huge risks to the energy grid, both digital and physical. What does this all mean for how Sweden approaches resilience? The Nordics have this tradition of focusing on vital societal functions, an all-hazards approach. Is that model still fit for purpose in this hybrid warfare era?
That's the million kroner question, isn't it? That traditional model is great for things like floods or power outages caused by storms, but it really struggles with the sheer digital dependency of modern society.
How so?
Well, think about cloud computing. Sources suggest nearly half of European businesses, Sweden included, rely heavily on US-based cloud providers for critical functions.
Okay, seems normal practice these days.
It is, but it creates a massive geopolitical risk. Remember the Schrems suck at court ruling? It basically blew up the old ways EU data could be sent to the US because EU privacy laws like GDPR clash fundamentally with US surveillance laws.
Like the privacy shield thing.
Exactly. It highlighted how relying on non-EU infrastructure compromises European control over its own vital data. What if, due to political tensions, access gets cut off, or data gets seized under foreign laws? It undermines digital sovereignty and creates a huge compliance headache, especially with GDPR.
So this dependency is seen as a strategic vulnerability in itself.
Definitely. And it's led to a strong push, reflected in the sources, for what's called digital sovereignty. Businesses and experts are saying Europe, including Sweden, needs to get serious about building its own capabilities.
What does that mean in practice?
It means things like prioritizing the development of sovereign cloud solutions, cloud infrastructure based in Europe under European law. It means pooling resources, maybe across countries, and crucially, using public procurement as a lever, essentially requiring government agencies to buy European when it comes to critical digital infrastructure, rebuilding that domestic capacity.
That seems like a long-term project, though. What about the immediate legislative or regulatory help that security professionals need right now, especially in finance, dealing with all those attacks?
Yeah, there are some very practical things they're asking for. One big one is tackling online data publication. Fraudsters scrape publicly available personal data to map out potential victims for scams. They want authorities to restrict what personal info gets put online so easily.
Makes sense. What else?
Telephone fraud is huge, often using spoofed numbers that look legitimate. They need telecom operators to be mandated to implement proper anti-spoofing technology to shut down that avenue of attack.
So technical standards imposed on telcos.
Right, and the final really big one, especially for banks fighting fraud and money laundering, is better information sharing. They need faster, easier, legally secure ways to share data about suspicious activities, like identifying straw men used to launder money, both among themselves and with the authorities.
Is anything actually happening on that front?
There is some progress. The establishment of a new financial intelligence center, called FINIC, set for 2025, is a direct response to this need. It's meant to be that central hub for banks and authorities to collaborate more effectively against financial crime. So steps are being taken, but the urgency is clear.
Okay, that brings us pretty much full circle. It's been a deep dive indeed. The key takeaways seem to be Sweden's facing these complex, blended hybrid threats. The civilian sector needs a major cybersecurity uplift urgently. And the core infrastructure, finance, and energy, they're under intense escalating pressure from both cyber and physical threats with potentially massive consequences. And navigating this kind of complex, high-stakes environment, well, it demands the best resources and expertise. For the C-suite leaders, the CISOs, the security professionals listening who are tasked with tackling these challenges head-on, finding trusted partners and solutions is critical. That's why we recommend checking out our sponsor, www.comarketplace.com.
And just to leave you, the listener, with something to chew on, building on everything we've discussed from the sources, they suggest a cyber attack doesn't even need to be nation-endingly huge to potentially threaten financial stability itself. Not just one bank, but the system.
The stability of the whole economy.
Potentially. So if a cyber threat can actually escalate to the point where it destabilizes an entire national economy, crossing that line from organizational security into systemic economic risk, what kind of response does that require? What level of international crisis management beyond just standard cyber defense teams do governments and alliances like NATO need to have planned and ready for that kind of worst-case scenario? Something to think about.